Welcome back to Gender Decoded, the show where we peel back the layers of data to reveal the real stories behind gender, identity, and social change. I'm your host, and today we're diving into something that's not often talked about, but affects a surprisingly large number of people, young men in the United States, who are increasingly disconnected from both education and employment. We're talking about NEETs, young people not in education, employment, or training. Stick with me for the next 10-15 minutes as we unpack what this means, why it's happening, and what the data reveals about the gender differences driving this quiet crisis. So, what exactly are we talking about today? You've probably heard of NEETs before, maybe in the context of youth unemployment or social disengagement. But this episode is about taking that basic definition and cracking it open to see what's really going on under the surface. The numbers may look similar on the surface. NEET rates for men and women hover around 12% in 2024, but their stories are very different. We're going to talk about how this trend has evolved over time, how college enrollment and parenting influence these numbers, what role disability plays, and perhaps most surprisingly, how some young men are just opting out of the system altogether. We'll explore why this matters not just for them, but for all of us.
Welcome to Gender Decoded, when numbers align, seeing the stories that data defines, breaking the barriers, truth untold, insights in gender, the data falls.
Let's rewind a bit. The term NEET emerged in the 1990s in policy circles and has been widely used to identify young people who are disconnected from two major systems that typically define the transition to adulthood, school, and work. Being NEET isn't just about unemployment, it's about disconnection. This stage of life, from 16 to 24, is supposed to be when young adults build skills, social networks, and a foundation for their future. When large segments of the population are missing out, we should be paying close attention. And what's interesting is that while women's NEET rates have steadily declined, largely due to better access to college and fewer teen pregnancies, men have not followed that same trajectory. In fact, they've slightly regressed. Now, let's talk data. The findings we're looking at today come from a combination of sources, primarily the Current Population Survey (CPS), which provides monthly labor force statistics in the U.S., and was analyzed using age-filtered data for non-institutionalized civilians aged 16-24. The researchers disaggregated NEETs, not just by gender, but also by reasons for being NEET, whether they were looking for work, had a disability, were parents, or none of the above. This layered breakdown helps us go beyond that 12% number and see who's really in this group. Here's what they found. First, let's start with the big trend. NEET rates for young women have dropped from 19% in 1990 to about 13% in 2024. That's a big win, and it's closely tied to the rise in female college enrollment and a dramatic decline in teen pregnancy. In contrast, young men have gone from a 10% NEET rate in 1990 to 12% in 2024. Not a dramatic increase, but enough to signal that something's off. And more concerning is the composition of this group. Take this. Nearly 1 in 3 male NEETs are actively seeking work, compared to only 1 in 5 female NEETs. That sounds good at first, at least they're trying. But the deeper story is that the share of men who are not even trying to find work has increased. From 1990 to 2024, the portion of male NEETs who are completely out of the labor force doubled from 4% to 8%. That's a big shift. It tells us that more young men are disengaging, not just failing to connect with work or school, but stepping away from even attempting to do so. Now add disability to the mix. For both sexes, having a disability triples the likelihood of being NEET. For young men with a disability, the NEET rate is a staggering 35%. Compare that to 11% for those without a disability. And while disability explains some of the disconnection, it's not the full story. Most NEETs do not have a disability, do not have kids, and are not actively looking for work. Now parenting. Young women with children are nearly 4 times more likely to be NEET than those without 40% versus 10%. Meanwhile, for men, becoming a father barely moves the needle, 15% for dads, 12% for non-dads. That tells us that parenting responsibilities are deeply gendered. Women are stepping back from work or school to care for children. Men, not so much. Race adds another layer. NEET rates are higher for black men, 18%, than black women, 15%, bucking the trend seen in other racial groups. And while NEET rates for women of all races have declined, male rates have stayed fairly stable. Asian men have the lowest NEET rates overall, just 8%, even lower than Asian women at 9%. What all this points to is a growing gender divide in how young people are preparing or failing to prepare for adult life. While women have made huge gains in education and career readiness, a subset of young men seem to be stuck. And they're not stuck in an obvious way, they're quietly slipping out of systems that we've built to support growth and independence. That makes them easy to miss and harder to help. So where does this leave us? In today's episode, we've seen that while NEET rates may look similar at a glance, the underlying stories are very different. Women's NEET numbers are falling, largely thanks to education and fewer early pregnancies. Men's numbers, meanwhile, are inching up, and the portion of men who aren't working, studying, or even looking for work is growing. Disabilities, parenting, and race all affect the likelihood of being NEET, but in very gender-specific ways. Perhaps most alarming is the quiet disengagement of many young men from school, work, and even ambition. And while it's easy to stereotype or mock this group, we need nuance. The majority of young men are still earning or learning or both, but the ones who aren't deserve thoughtful attention, not blanket judgment. That's it for today's episode of Gender Decoded. If you found this conversation thought-provoking, please share it with someone who's curious about the intersection of gender, education, and social policy. Next time, we'll explore a completely different corner of the gendered world, so stay tuned. Until then, keep questioning the obvious and decoding the data. Talk to you soon.